Colin was wrong.
Now, there's a report here the Chiefs are the betting favorites to sign Tyreek Hill, and I don't get it. Been there and done that. Secondly, is he's got injury concerns and maturity off-field issues, and doesn't that kind of sum up what the Chiefs are already dealing with Rashee Rice? So I certainly don't think he's a great mentor for young receivers. Now, he's a home run hitter, but the way people are defending Tyreek Hill, I just don't think that's a primary need. I think it's more running back, O-line, and edge rusher. But the betting market says Tyreek's a Chief, and I don't really get it.
That is an interesting proposition. My immediate reaction is that the primary driving factor here is the potential to acquire a player of Tyreek Hill's caliber for a relatively modest financial commitment at this stage of his career. That would be my initial assumption. People will bring up the maturity concerns and the off-field baggage, and sure, those are factors to consider. But let's be real about what the Kansas City Chiefs are prioritizing right now. They are not bringing in Tyreek Hill to be a mentor or a veteran role model for their young receiving corps. That is not the need here, nor is it the role they would be asking him to fill. If Patrick Mahomes were still a 23-year-old signal caller trying to find his footing in the league, then yes, having a stabilizing veteran presence in the locker room might carry more weight. But that is not the current reality. The Chiefs have a two-time MVP, a future Hall of Fame quarterback who has already established his leadership and his culture within that building. What they need is a player with instant pre-existing chemistry with that quarterback. Colin was touching on that idea of been there, done that with Hill and Mahomes. And it was not just mildly successful. It was historically productive. You can say what you want about Hill's career arc since leaving, but the undeniable truth is that the Kansas City offense, while still elite, has never quite replicated the same explosive, soul-crushing dynamism it possessed when he was lining up opposite Travis Kelce. Now, I am not naive enough to suggest that the version of Tyreek Hill we would see in 2026 is going to replicate the transcendent production of 2018. Father Time is undefeated, and receivers, even the great ones, eventually hit a wall. But the calculus changes dramatically based on the price tag. If the financial outlay is reasonable, this move has the potential to pay significant dividends. I genuinely believe that. And once again, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room regarding Hill's personal history. I am not going to sit here and defend or excuse any of the off-field incidents from his past. Frankly, it makes me uncomfortable even delving into that territory. Some of the situations that have come to light, both with him and more recently with a player like Rashee Rice, create a level of unease that is hard to shake. I hate that this aspect is so deeply woven into the fabric of professional sports. It creates a moral quandary for fans and analysts alike, because none of us want to find ourselves rooting for individuals who may have been involved in genuinely harmful situations. And to compound the problem, we rarely, if ever, have all the details, which leaves everyone speculating in an information vacuum. It is a genuinely tricky space to navigate. However, I would argue that the Chiefs are uniquely positioned to absorb a personality like Hill's, precisely because of the ecosystem he would be re-entering. The culture in Kansas City is not built by the players in the locker room. It is built and enforced by the pillars of the organization: Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, and Patrick Mahomes. These are the figures who set the tone, who demand accountability, and who establish the standard. When you have foundational leaders like that, the organization almost transcends the typical need for a culture built from the player pool up. Other teams, like the Philadelphia Eagles or the San Francisco 49ers, for example, need a strong, player-driven culture to succeed because their leadership structure relies more heavily on that internal dynamic. The Chiefs have a different hierarchy. The strings are being pulled by a Hall of Fame coach and an all-time great quarterback. In that environment, I believe Tyreek Hill would instantly fall in line and become a good soldier. He understands the assignment. He knows his role is to be in service of Andy and Mahomes, to be a weapon executing their vision. That is precisely the mentality required for this to work. So, does this move single-handedly determine whether they win another Super Bowl? That is a massive oversimplification. But consider this. If they had a player of Tyreek's caliber on the roster last season, does it improve their chances in that Super Bowl loss? Absolutely. I am not saying it guarantees a victory, but it certainly provides a significant boost to an offense that, at times, lacked a true vertical threat. The biggest questions are not about the concept, but about the player's current state. Who is Tyreek Hill in 2026? How healthy are his legs? How much of that explosive juice remains after years of high usage and accumulating wear and tear? I honestly do not have the answer to that. And regarding my earlier defense of his potential integration into the Chiefs' culture, there is always the looming question of his overall stability. Does he run the risk of progressively becoming more chaotic, more erratic, more unpredictable as he ages, following a trajectory similar to what we witnessed with Antonio Brown? It is certainly within the realm of possibility. We cannot rule that out. However, I do believe there is a strong argument to be made that a return to Kansas City, to the familiarity and stability of Andy Reid's coaching and the respect he has for Mahomes, might yield a more grounded, focused version of Tyreek. What that actually translates to on the field in 2026 is pure speculation. There is a lot we are guessing at here. He has dealt with injuries. He is at an age where receivers often decline, and he has always played with a physical style that leads to him being banged up. All of this ambiguity is precisely why the price point is the ultimate deciding factor. If the asking price is exorbitant, somewhere in the $35 to $40 million per year range, then the answer is an easy no. That would be a financial disaster. But we have recent market comparables to consider. Look at Davante Adams. He signed a deal with the Los Angeles Rams reportedly in the range of $20 million per year. If the Chiefs could secure Tyreek Hill for a similar figure, I would absolutely be on board with that. If I were running another franchise, would I be interested? It depends entirely on the environment I could offer. The Rams, with Sean McVay, would be a logical fit. The 49ers, with Kyle Shanahan, also make sense. But the Chiefs are at the top of my list for ideal destinations. However, a team like the Houston Texans, that would be a hard pass from me. The environment you can provide is critical to whether a Tyreek Hill signing pays off or blows up in your face. Colin is raising the point that he does not understand the logic, and on the surface, I get it. If you are making a list of the ideal traits you want to add to your roster, a volatile, aging wide receiver with a complicated history is probably not at the top. But you have to consider the context of the Kansas City Chiefs. Given who they are as an organization, the structure they have in place, and the potential financial flexibility if they can avoid paying him top-tier money, the risk-reward equation shifts. If they can replicate a Davante Adams-type deal, I believe it is a risk worth taking. There is also the unresolved situation with Rashee Rice. There is a legitimate question mark hanging over his availability for the 2026 season. There is a very real possibility that the Chiefs have to approach this offseason operating under the assumption that Rice may not be on the field, whether due to suspension or other circumstances. I have no desire to spend another offseason speculating on legal situations and potential discipline like we did with Rice, and, previously, with Xavier Worthy. It becomes a messy, uncomfortable cycle. The more serious the allegations become, the more uneasy I am discussing them in a sports context. Unless concrete details emerge, it feels inappropriate to speculate. A situation like a hit and run, where we had video evidence and police reports, is easier to discuss factually. These amorphous situations where details are scarce fall outside the scope of how I prefer to operate. I try to keep the focus on the sport itself and minimize the off-field noise. Let's circle back to the contract. Davante Adams got a 2-year, $46 million deal from the Rams. I think you could realistically get Tyreek Hill for significantly less than that. In fact, some reports are suggesting he might be available for around the $14 million per year range, which aligns with the value I am suggesting. At that price point, it is not just a good move, it could be an absolute steal. I criticized other teams for not jumping on the Adams deal at that number. The Bills could have done it. The Ravens could have found a way to make it work. The fact that the Rams got him for that was a massive bargain. If the Chiefs can secure Hill for an even cheaper rate, it is a no-brainer from a strategic standpoint. It doesn't guarantee a home run, but it is a smart, calculated gamble. There is also the intangible element of reuniting the band. There is a psychological boost, an injection of energy that comes with bringing Tyreek back into the fold. It reignites that feeling of, all right, we've got Tyreek, we've got Travis, we've got Mahomes, we've got Andy. Let's go. Colin is skeptical now, but I can already predict the October narrative if this works out. The talking heads will be saying, this is what the Chiefs do. Nobody else would touch Tyreek Hill. but Andy Reid knew he could handle him. And that is the genius of Patrick Mahomes. You can't do this with other quarterbacks. You can't do this with Josh Allen. You can't do this with Baker Mayfield. You can't even try this with a young guy like Drake May. But with Mahomes, you can. That is why he has multiple rings and Lamar Jackson doesn't. That is why Andy Reid is better than Belichick. Would that narrative shock you? It is almost predictable at this point. And if it fails, the same voices will pivot to, "I told you this was a mistake from the start." Ultimately, I am supportive of this move. I will plant my flag on that. I am not guaranteeing it will be a home run. I am not promising it will fix all their problems. But I know this. For an Andy Reid and a Patrick Mahomes-led offense, the primary requirement from role players is competence. Just give them baseline competence, and their system tends to produce magic. When you combine competence with elite talent, even if that talent is on the downside of their career, you get success. You get wins. Andy Reid has a proven track record of maximizing whatever juice a player has left. And with Patrick Mahomes under center, there is no risk of the quarterback becoming a liability. A lot of what Tyreek Hill can contribute at this stage comes down to coaching and scheme. That is why Davante Adams could only do so much in certain situations. With the Raiders, he was marginalized. With the Jets, he produced at times but was inconsistent. With Sean McVay, he was immediately maximized and looked like his old self. On a spectrum, there is still plenty to extract from Tyreek Hill, especially at a $14 million price point. Even if it is a one-year prove-it deal or a two-year $30 million structure, the value is there. Those are my thoughts. I am genuinely curious to hear yours. What do you all think about the Kansas City Chiefs' potential pursuit of Tyreek Hill? Do you believe they will actually sign him? Is it a move you want to see happen? If they do bring him back, do you think it will be beneficial, or do you foresee it hurting their long-term outlook? Let me know your perspective. I make it a point to read every single comment, so whether you are in agreement with my take or you think I am completely off base, I want to hear it. Let's get some discussions going. Let's get into some healthy debates. But above all, let's keep it fun. And please, if you are enjoying the content, consider subscribing. We are in the process of building something special here, a community that feels connected and invested in these conversations. I want to create a space we are all genuinely excited to be a part of, and I believe we are well on our way to achieving that. Do not forget to hit the thumbs up. It genuinely helps with visibility and keeps the algorithm happy. Thank you all so much. I will see you in the next one.